Hello, everyone. My name is Morgan Woods, and I will be talking about assertive discipline. I'd like to apologize for the way that my camera looks. I'm not sure what's wrong with it. But anyway, when I think of assertive discipline, I like to imagine someone who is a leader, someone who is calm. I feel like in the past, as a kid, even as a teenager and in college, I had teachers who were too aggressive, or I had teachers who were too passive, and that doesn't really work for any age group. But assertive is kind of right in the middle. The baseline for assertive discipline is I am the teacher, this is my classroom, you will not stop me from teaching. So, assertive teachers work really hard to not lose control of their classrooms, and they keep open communication. They're very open with their students, but they don't let their students take over the classroom. Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets World, I think he was an assertive teacher. He had boundaries with his students, but he was also very open with them. And they felt very open to discuss with him, but they weren't unruly in his class. Assertive discipline, that theory came from Lee and Marlene Cantor. Lee was working in social work. He married Marlene. Um, Marlene was a special education teacher. She had difficult behavior with some of her students. So her and Lee worked together to come up with something that would work. She had one student in particular who caused her a lot of problems, and she felt that she needed to find a way to work with that child. Lee earned a bachelor's degree in history and a master's degree in social work. He found that he could make a larger difference doing social work than he could by teaching. And later in life, he became involved in consulting teachers and training teachers and consulting with school districts on discipline and behavior. Marlene was a special education teacher, or is a special education teacher. Like I mentioned before, she experienced difficult behaviors within her own classroom and felt that the behavior model that was being used was not productive for her or her students. So she worked with her husband to come up with one that would work. The focus of assertive discipline is that the needs of the teachers and the students must be met, and that the classroom has to be set up in a way that that can happen. Students deserve a learning environment that is respectful and free from distractions, and teachers deserve the same kind of environment to teach in. Successful teachers are able to remain in control of their classrooms, but can also focus on the needs of their students. Discipline is built on trust and respect rather than fear, and teachers are not super passive, so they don't just let the students do whatever they want to. Um, for students to be able to understand positive behavior, or for students to be able to understand positive behavior, teachers must model that for them. And then teachers also need to be proactive when dealing with behavior rather than reactive, and they need to use positive reinforcement with their students. Here are some of the inner workings of the model. So, to start, at the beginning of the year, teachers need to set firm boundaries and rules with their students. They need to be clear about this, and they need to make sure that their students understand what they mean, and they need to stick with it. Students have to know that they will not be permitted to stop their teacher from teaching with their behavior, and then teacher needs must be met before student needs can be met. It reminds me of that saying that you can't pour from an empty cup. That kind of reminds me of this model. Teachers cannot be wishy-washy with their students. They can't say something and then go with something else later. They have to be fair and consistent. Consequences should be clear and predictable. When a student does something or thinks about doing something that they shouldn't do, they should know what's going to happen if they do that. That should be set up at the beginning of the year with your boundaries and your rules. Teachers also cannot be scared of parents or administration. That's something that I've definitely struggled with, was being or having a hard time discussing things with parents. But that doesn't work with assertive discipline. You have to be willing to talk to your students' parents and with administration, and you all have to work together to teach the children and to make sure that their education is the way it needs to be. Some discipline strategies that work with this model that can be used in the classroom are setting clear rules, setting firm boundaries. Those two kind of go together, and I mentioned them in the last slide, but that is so important that from the beginning of the year, no matter what grade you're teaching, no matter what type of students you're dealing with, you set clear rules and firm boundaries, and you make sure that your students understand that. You also need to use consistent consequences when you're using this model. Like I mentioned before, students need to know what the consequence is of their action. They also need to know that you're going to follow through on that. You're not just going to let that slide. And then for some students, maybe you let it go, and then some students you punish them. You can't do that. You have to be consistent with your punishment and always follow through with it. And then on the other side of that, you have to reward positive behavior in front of the whole class. Point out the things that students are doing right rather than the things that they're doing wrong. And then that sets students up to want to exhibit more positive behavior in the classroom. Assertive discipline can lead to having a calmer learning environment for students and a calmer teaching environment for teachers. It can lead to order and certainty in the classroom. Studies have shown that it may cause up to an 80% drop in disruptive behaviors. That's something that Lee Cantor said himself, is that you may see a massive drop in disruptive behaviors when using assertive discipline. And then students will have a clear expectation and a clear understanding of consequences. Some of the weaknesses of this model are that there is little consideration for individual needs or students or underlying causes for behavior. This is especially true for students who may have IEPs or 504 plans. If you're using this model, you need to make sure that you think about the needs of those students. And then another is that it could lead to less interaction by students. And here are some of the references for this work. And thank you.